What if I told you that lane splitting makes commuting safer, greener, and more efficient, not just for bikers, but for the entire motoring community, and that if legalized nationwide, it would save us over $13 million a day? Curious yet? Greetings riders, Nick here with Pegasus Motorcycle Tours and Consulting, bringing you what I hope to be a lively conversation about a topic that truly is very important, not only to the motorcycle riding community, but indeed to the motoring public as a whole. The topic involves a controversial law of the road known as lane splitting, lane sharing, or lane filtering, which is unfortunately fraught with misconceptions and misinformation. And yet, as this video will argue, it is a law that saves lives, time, money, and the environment, and benefits virtually all motorists sharing the road, and thus ought to be the law of the land. So this video is in two parts. The first part has a principal purpose to inform and hopefully persuade you that lane splitting is a very beneficial practice that ought to be legalized nationwide. This I plan to do through the use of sound argumentation and respected motorcycle safety research papers and statistics, all of which have been linked to the description of this video below for your own review. The purpose is also to give you the tools and the language to defend the practice of lane splitting to drivers and others who don't actually understand its benefits. In part 2 of this two-part series, the secondary purpose of this video is to introduce you to some of the tactics of how to lane split safely and respectfully. I've scoured YouTube for any and all information relating to lane splitting, and much to my surprise, have found so much of what I think to be counterproductive and quite frankly dangerous advice. So I felt compelled to share what I've learned over nearly 15 years of domestic and international lane splitting experience to help you in being a better, safer rider. So here's everything you need to know about lane splitting. Lane splitting is simply the practice of riding a motorcycle between two lanes of vehicles moving in the same direction. It's a practice that is quite common throughout the world. When you tour abroad, lane splitting is more or less the norm, whether legally sanctioned or not. The US is the only industrialized nation that does not allow lane splitting universally across every state. It remains legal only in California, technically only since January 1st of 2017. However, I do recall touring here in 2011 as part of my solo world tour for the American Cancer Society called the Pegasus Project. Some of you may remember that. And it was commonly practiced back then without much attention from the police. In my experience, lane splitting as practiced abroad, generally speaking, is much more aggressive than here stateside. Part of this seemingly erratic road behavior and simply out of necessity. Very heavy traffic, poor or narrow roads, lax laws or their enforcement, which to an American eye can seem a little bit chaotic. My suggestion here is to always ride in a way that is within your own capacity to do so safely. Likewise, here in the US, where we have wide roads that are generally in good condition, comparatively speaking, and stricter universal adherence to the rules of the road, conditions for lane splitting are generally quite excellent. However, please note that this does not mean that every rider out there ought to engage in this practice. Lane splitting should be reserved for those riders that feel like it's within their individual personal limits of skill and comfort. The views expressed here are simply my own opinions. The responsibility rests squarely on each and every rider personally to ride safely and respectfully and within their own limits. That said, just a quick forward. I find videos consisting solely of riders filming themselves as they talk in their Bluetooth not my thing, and I try to avoid that here, including clips from all over the world that I find to be kind of interesting. However, given that lane splitting is a practical skill, some of that will be necessary just so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about and what I'm referring to when offering my suggestions for safe and effective lane splitting. I also invite you to participate in the conversation by commenting, asking questions, providing your own opinions. Know that I myself read and reply to all the comments, so let's please share our collective knowledge and let's learn from one another. That said, let's begin. I initially started to film with the Sena GoPro audio pack, which automatically syncs the audio from your Sena unit with the video feed from the GoPro Hero 3 or 4. Take a look at my video reviewing that particular unit. However, I stopped doing that and I decided instead to narrate in post-editing for two main reasons. For one, my GoPro kept freezing up anytime that Sena was involved. And I don't know, is that the fault of the GoPro? or lack of updates or the Senna. And more importantly, I wanted to practice what I preach regarding safety and being fully focused and concentrated on what we're doing here. So I decided I'm not going to be focusing on the narration. I'm going to shut that off and I'm going to narrate in post-editing. But this is what the Senna unit sounds like before we cut off and go to the post-editing narration. And this is what it sounds like with the visor open. We have just enough space to cut through here. Let's do it. The fact is, lane splitting and by extension motorcycling is a dangerous activity that requires your full, undivided attention. So please, turn off the music, don't take that phone call, fight the complacency, and engage in this activity at your own risk. You will notice I ride my numerous motorcycles throughout this video. The cruisers, Yamaha Roadstar Warrior and Indian Scout, the adventure tours, Suzuki V-Strom and KLR 650, the sport tours, Honda VFR and the Triumph Sprint ST, but I chose to film the majority of it on my Honda Goldwing, basically to stress the fact that it can be done safely with one of the largest, heaviest, and quietest motorcycles on the road today. Besides, the Goldwing is one of my favorite daily commuters thanks to its powerful engine, its agile maneuverability, its outstanding brakes and lighting and wind protection, and its impressive storage capacity. But I invite you to take a look at our reviews of each of these bikes mentioned here on our channel. And while you're here, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And please also share with your riding community so that we can help this channel grow and help bring you more videos like this. So we're all familiar with the arguments against lane splitting. People often claim it's more dangerous, it's disrespectful, it's even insane. All of those claims happen to be inadequate, to say the least. But allow me to elaborate. Here are some of the arguments for lane splitting. Lane splitting is actually greener, cheaper, healthier, more exciting, and contrary to popular belief, it's actually safer too. Not just for the bikers, but for everybody on the road. Let's deconstruct each of these points individually. Number one, it's greener. The often cited 2012 Belgian study, which I've linked in the description below, argues that if only 10% of the motorists switched to commuting by motorcycle instead, the move would alleviate about 40% of traffic congestion. Now think about that for a moment. We're talking about a very significant positive outcome resulting from a law that is aimed also to be a pull factor to bring more people to switch from cars to motorcycles. More motorcycles on the road means potentially less greenhouse gas emissions. It also means more motorcycle advocates, more motorcycle friendly laws, more motorcycle parking, etc., etc., etc. I live in Southern California and I ride for a living. Highways here can get up to 14 lanes full of traffic on each side during rush hour twice a day. Now, can you imagine if 40% of those cars were not on the road every day? Number two, it saves money. The same study found that in Belgium alone, lane splitting can contribute to a daily savings of nearly $400,000. Now, this is calculated through factors such as savings in time, productivity, savings from amortization of vehicles due to stop-and-go traffic, vehicle emissions, road deterioration, etc. Now, I have extrapolated that sum of change to the United States with its 265 million vehicles on the road, and it translates to daily savings of over $13 million. Now, can you imagine what our communities would be able to do with an additional $4.5 billion of savings each year? Number three, it's healthier. Passenger vehicles such as cars and trucks have cabin air filters that filter out pollutants such as dust and pollen and smog and mold spores. Bikers, on the other hand, have to breathe all that shit in every day. So next time a driver complains about how bikers unfairly get to avoid the traffic and skip to the front, remind them what it feels like to be stuck in traffic and sucking the exhaust in a parking garage. Number four, it's more exciting. The fact is that zipping past cars and traffic is extremely exciting, mainly because it requires exceptional focus. And this predictably might represent a problem. It's easy to get carried away. It's equally as easy to get complacent when lane splitting. If you find you lack self-control to ride safely between vehicles, then this is sufficient reason not to engage in the practice. Also, if you find yourself a little too comfortable, too often dozing off in daydreams as your muscles ride the bike for you without any input from your brain, please reconsider if this is something you should be doing. lane splitting is inherently dangerous in that your time and space to react is severely diminished. There is very little room for error or correction. You have to be on top of your game every ride. Number 5, it's safer. Contrary to popular belief, lane splitting is significantly safer for bikers. The 1981 Hurt Report, the Bible of road safety for motorcyclists, and the most extensive motorcycle safety research study of its time, concluded that 2/3 of accidents involving motorcyclists are caused by car drivers instead. The most common accident is being rear-ended or a biker rear-ending another vehicle. The likelihood for either of these scenarios is significantly diminished when riders can simply maneuver between vehicles. A comparative study of California, Florida, and Texas, the 3 states with the largest riding community, reached the conclusion that in Cali alone there's 30% less accidents directly linked to the benefits of lane splitting. It's not hard to argue that any of these positive effects of lane splitting laws would be enough on their own to make this a nationwide law. Remember, we motorcyclists are ambassadors for motorcycling when we're on the road, and the manner in which we choose to share the road with other motorists is largely determined by them, not by us. We're the minority, and we have to work hard to persuade them why we ought to have these great laws that have such a positive effect on our daily lives. I ride for pleasure, for travel, for commuting, but I also ride for a living. Riding is my life, and part of moving to California from Michigan for me had everything to do with lane splitting. In fact, I moved on my VFR 800 knowing that I could ride pretty much every week out of the year and that I could lane split legally. This one law was a huge pull factor for me now calling California home, and it's time to make it the law of the land throughout the whole United States. So in the second part of this discussion, I will introduce the specific techniques for safe and effective lane splitting. In the meantime, ride safe. Nick, I'm out.